I love my kids. Deep down, I'm still a kid at heart myself. I have a very rich, imaginative life, and that life is part of what drives my translation projects. It also means that I still enjoy browsing the toy aisle at the store. Lucky for me, I have kids so it doesn't look so strange when we walk through the aisle together. Unfortunately, my kids like all the boring toys, and I end up dragging them to the far end of the aisle kicking and screaming, which seems to distort the illusion a little. When my son fell in love with the My Little Pony franchise, I was a little disappointed. Those were the boring toys. Fortunately, it was well-written stories, and I ended up enjoying the television series and the first entry into the Equestria Girls spin-off. Then my son betrayed me again. Equestria Girls, being girls and not ponies, failed to capture his imagination. For me, it was more interesting than the cartoon, though. I have difficulty imagining how I would navigate a magical world populated by talking horses. High school I can imagine navigating, though. My son wasn't interested in seeing the movie. My daughter was too young to sit through a movie in the theater. So my wife and I ended up seeing Rainbow Rocks in the theater on a date night after it had been out for a few weeks. I know how to navigate high school. Sort of. I'm more than 25 years out of practice. But in theory. But our protagonist returns to this world where she's out of her element from the world I would have no idea how to navigate. Okay, the first act is Deus Ex Machina, the movie. You can tell the writers hadn't anticipated a return to the story. Sunset Shimmer just happens to remember a way to communicate with Equestria that had never been mentioned before. Twilight Sparkle just happens to be receiving the other side of that communication in Equestria. Twilight just happens to figure out a way to use that to travel between worlds. All too convenient. If any part of the story could use a few more rounds of rewrite, it's that. But it's what it took to get everyone where they needed to be. Twilight is an expert on magic in Equestria. The villains are banished magical equestrian creatures trying to absorb as much magic as possible to regain their power. This should be a short showdown. Twilight fully expects that it will all come naturally. She joins hands with her friends and shouts, "Care Bear Stare!" or something close enough to it, and thought that would be the end of the movie. Instead, this is where the movie really gets going. Anyone who has ever reached a level of expertise in a subject can relate to Twilight in that moment. When I was doing technical support, I was a certified expert in fonts. I designed and built some fonts. I dissected existing fonts that weren't working as I expected to find out what was wrong. Along with my font training came print driver training. The two are so interconnected that to be an expert in one requires a high degree of expertise in the other. So after troubleshooting new printer drivers for a week and a half one time, I felt rather silly to discover that the problem boiled down to me using the Canadian English driver for my United States English printer and operating system. As a black belt in Kung Fu, I had to learn a number of escapes from holds and pins. But 2 years later, when studying with someone who had a different take on Chin-Na than I had grown up with, I was amazed to learn a new, easier escape from a common hold. When I first started looking into the synoptic problem to explain how it connected to my theory of Hebrew Matthew, I expected to conclude in Matthean priority, since so many other traditional solutions to problems had served me so well so often. Yet by the time I was done, I was a Markan prioritist. I've listened to lectures from experts in New Testament that were corrected by audience members when discussing Canaanite gods, and Old Testament experts that made simple errors in chronology for the events of Acts. Textual critics have made mistakes in history, and historians have misunderstood textual criticism. It doesn't matter how many times it happens. Every single time I think I'm in my wheelhouse, and I turn out to be mistaken, it stings. It's a blow to my confidence. I'm never afraid to be wrong in biology or politics or popular culture. These aren't my subjects. I'll boldly say something fully expecting to be corrected in these subjects. But I'm very much more careful when I talk about things I expect myself to know a bunch about. I hate when I join hands with my friends, yell, "Care Bear stare," and nothing happens. But sometimes, that's the life we live.